Hi, welcome to the Gemara on Chaf Chad Amud Bet. We're starting two lines down in the wide lines at the end of the line. Umaspidin behen hesped shel rabim. A quote not from our Mishnah, but from the previously quoted Breita about being able to recite a eulogy in shul if it's a eulogy of the many, and we'll see what that means. Heichidami hesped rabim. What is the case of a hesped for the masses? What does this mean? Machvi Rav Chisda kigon hesped zakai be Rav Sheshet. So Rav Chisda sort of gestured as though to say, like the hesped of the house of Rav Sheshet. So if Rashi explains, if a member of Rav Sheshet's household were to die, that would be something that was for the masses. That funeral would be attended by a lot of people, and so that would be a hesped of the Rabbim. Machve Rav Sheshet kigon hesped zakai be Rav Chisda. And Rav Sheshet indicated or gestured, that's what machve means, as though to say, like a hesped that involved the house of Rav Chisda. So same idea. Rafram aspede lakalte bebei knishta. Rafram eulogized his daughter-in-law in the shul. Amar, and he said, Mishu mikra didi udemita atu kuli alma. Because of the honor of me and of the dead person, the entire world will come. Ikra is honor or kavod, so one way or the other, everyone in the world is coming, and so this is a hesped to Rabbi. Rabbi Zera safte lahahu merabanan bebei knishta. Rabbi Zera eulogized a certain rabbi in the shul. Amar, imishu mikra didi, imishu mikra dide demita atu kule alma. He said, either because of my honor or the honor of the dead person, the whole world will come. The Bach, if you look at Haggadah Bach here, the Bach actually takes out the word dide and says it should just be the honor of the dead person, which is probably true. Reish Lakish safte lahu Turba Mirabanan de Shachiach Ba'arad Yisrael. Reish Lakish delivered a eulogy for a Turba Mirabanan, a scholar, certain Torah scholar who was found in Eretz Yisrael, which is where Reish Lakish lived. Dahavetana Hilchata B'chaf Daled Shurata, who taught halachot to 24 lines of students. Halachot, so he taught halachot, presumably that he had heard from somebody else, to 24 rows of students. Again, halachot is like, according to Rashi, it's mishnayot. They are pieces of law, so that's why they're called halachot. And he taught them to 24 rows of students. Amar, here's the eulogy, here's what Reish Lakish said. Vai chasra arad Yisrael gavra rabba. Oy now Eretz Yisrael is missing a great person. That was his eulogy. Hahu dahavetani hilchata sifra v'sifrei v'tosefta v'shachiv. There was a person who taught or who learned halachot, which again, according to Rashi, is mishnayot. Sifra, which is a collection of midrash. Specifically, it's the midrash on the book of Vayikra, primarily a legal work known as Torah Kohanim also. V'sifrei, and also Sifrei, which is another midrashic collection. This one on Bamidbar and Varim. V'tosefta, and also taught Tosefta, which you're familiar with. It's a collection of Braitot. So this was a guy who learned all these things, and he died. Atu v'amri le Rav Nachman, lisv'deimar. They came and they said to Rav Nachman, the master should eulogize him. It'd be appropriate for you to give a eulogy for him because he learned a lot of Torah. Amar, Rav Nachman said, Heichi nisv'dei. How should I eulogize him? Hai tzana demale sifra dechasar. Look at this basket of books who is now missing, and has been lost, right? Has died. In other words, he's saying there's no real eulogy to give here. This guy knew a lot of stuff, but he was basically just like a book. He wasn't a scholar. He wasn't someone who deeply understood the material. Rav Nachman's basically saying, we're not going to miss him. It's the same as like if a shelf of books disappeared. Like, okay, he knew a lot of Torah, but he didn't really do anything with it. So this is a contrast, of course, to the story that was just told about Reish Lakish. Reish Lakish, it seems, was eulogizing someone who had learned even less, right? Had only learned Hilchata, had only learned Halachot, and nonetheless gave him this much more intense eulogy. Ta'chazi ma ben tzkifei da'ar Yisrael chasidei b'Babel. Ta'chazi, come and see the difference, right? Ma bein, what is the difference between the strict ones or the strong ones of the land of Israel, and the Hasidim of Bavel. Rashi here explains that Reish Lakish was famous for being one of the Tekifei Da'ari Yisrael. I'll scroll down to find the Rashi. Reish Lakish was famous for being like a really no-nonsense kind of person, and there were certain people he wouldn't even associate with. Tekifei Da'ari Yisrael, Reish Lakish, Darina v'Masachet Yoma, Da'afil Bahadi, Rabba Bar Barachana lo Mishai. Reish Lakish wouldn't even talk to Rabba Barachana because he was so sort of convinced that he was more important. Whereas Rav Nachman Bar Yitzchak mechassidei Bavel, he's known as being from the Hasidim of Bavel. He's like a really God-fearing guy and a really nice guy. And that's the Gemara's kind of comment on the contrast between these two stories. Going on. Tznan hatam udi ishtamish betaga chalaf. So we learn in a Mishnah somewhere else that I think it's actually in Avot, that if you use the crown of Torah, you will pass from the world. So like you won't survive if you use the crown of Torah, presumably like sort of inappropriately use the crown of Torah, or you get service from somebody who learns or teaches a lot of Torah. You can't take advantage of that kind of person. Tani Reish Lakish taught about this. This is someone who uses someone who learns halachot. Kitra shel Torah, the crown of Torah. So in other words, if you, again, inappropriately use someone, you sort of get services from someone who learns halachot, again, learns Mishnayot, Kitra shel Torah, the crown of Torah, which the Bach actually takes out this phrase because it doesn't make so much sense in context, or maybe it's a reference to the person who learns halachot, that he is the crown of Torah. Anyway, it's basically just the same point, that you shouldn't use somebody who learns Torah. Ve'amar Ula, and Ula said, Lishtamish yinish b'man detani arba'a, v'lo lishtamish b'man dematni arba'a. Ula said it's better to use somebody who learns for than somebody who teaches for. And the four is the 4 orders of the Mishnah. Of course, there are 6 orders of the Mishnah that we know of, but it seems apparently the Gemara sometimes refers to 4 orders of the Mishnah by their count at that point. Maybe some of them were being grouped together. Anyway, so if you have to use somebody, better to use the one who merely learns rather than the one who also teaches. Ki had Reish Lakish, like the story of Reish Lakish, Hava Azil be'orcha. He was traveling on the road, and Mata Orka Madzamaya. He came to a pool of water, or a river of water. Atahahu Gavra, Arkavea Katve V'kama Avarle. And a certain man came and let him ride on his shoulders and took him across the water. So that was how Reish Lakish got across the water. Amarle, so Reish Lakish says to him, Karita, have you learned Torah? Are you someone who's learned presumably Tanakh? Amarle, Karina. He said, yeah, I've learned Torah. Tanita. So he says, have you learned Mishnah? Is that something that you've also done? And he says to him, Tanina arba sidrei Mishnah. He said, yeah, I've learned 4 orders of the Mishnah. Amarle, pasalta lecha arba'a turei v'ta'anta bar Lakish akatfech. So Reish Lakish, hearing that this guy has actually learned all this Torah, says, you've fashioned for yourself 4 orders, right? Pasalta, like to make a pasal. So you fashioned for yourself 4 orders. You've mastered them. You've created them for yourself, and yet you're carrying Reish Lakish on your shoulders. You're carrying me on your shoulders. Shadi bar Lakisha b'maya. Throw me in the water, right? You should throw me in the water. You shouldn't carry me. You shouldn't serve, right? Someone who's a Torah scholar shouldn't serve somebody else. You're not supposed to use someone who's a Torah scholar. Amar Lai, but the guy says back to him, Nichali da'ashmi inan lamar. He says back to him, no, it's good for me. It's pleasing for me to serve the master. Meaning like, I'm happy to serve you, right? You should like allow me to do this. Ihachi gmormini. Gmormini hamilta. So Rish Lakish says, okay, well, so if so, you should learn this thing from me. Meaning, I guess, at least if you really want to get pleasure from me, I should teach you. Maybe also because that then sets up a teacher-student relationship, and then it's sort of more okay to do menial tasks for somebody if they're your teacher. To Amar Rabbi Zera, so this is what he's going to teach him. A halacha that was said by Rabbi Zera. Bnot Yisrael hen hechmiru al atzman she'afilu rot tipat dam kechardal yashvod alei shiva nekiyim. The daughters of Israel were stringent upon themselves, hichmiru al atzman, that even if they saw a drop of blood the size of a mustard seed, they literally sat on it or waited for it 7 blood-free days. This refers to a concept that we have actually discussed previously this year, that in the Torah, a woman who is a zava has to wait 7 days after she stops seeing a flow of blood and then go to the mikvah, but a woman who's a nida simply waits until she stops having her period. Just she waits 7 days and then she goes to the mikvah. There's no 7 blood-free day wait. And this statement here is very famous, sometimes called Chomer de Rabbi Zera. That Rabbi Zera said that the women of Israel themselves, in trying to figure out how to accommodate Nida versus Zava, these are both categories in the Torah, it's very unclear which is which, it's hard to figure it out. So in order to kind of come up with a practice that made sense, the women were strict upon themselves, and even if they only saw a drop of blood the size of a mustard seed, which is very, very teeny tiny, then they wait 7 blood-free days. In other words, they don't just treat it as nida, they treat it as zava or zava gedola, and they wait 7 blood-free days. So this is the halacha that he chooses to teach him. Tana de Eliyahu was taught in the house of Eliyahu. Kol hashoneh halachot muftach lo shehu ben olam haba. Maybe you've heard this before. Anyone who learns halachot, who learns mishnayot, but it could be in this context any halachot even, is sure to be to have a portion in the world to come. Shnei amar halichot olam lo. As it says, this pasuk from Habakkuk, the ways of the world are his. Al tikri halichot el halachot. So don't read it as halichot, like ways, but rather halachot. So halachot, right? Someone who learns halachot, the world belongs to that person. Tanu Rabbanan. Moving on to another brayta. We'll scroll down. Mivadlin Talmud Torah lahotzaat hamet ulahachnasat hakala. So you can miss Talmud Torah, right? You can take time away from learning Torah for 2 purposes: to take out a dead body, right? To bury the dead, and to bring in a bride. Rashi explains this as accompanying the bride from her father's house to her wedding, to her chuppah. Amru alav al Rabbi Yehuda b'Rabbi Eli shehaya mevatel Talmud Torah lotzat hamet l'hachnasat hakala. And they said, specifically, it was said, in praise of Rabbi Yehuda bar Rabbi Eli, that he would in fact leave his Torah learning in order to bury the dead, in order to bring in the bride. This is all part of the brayta. B'medrei mamarim. In what case is this said? B'she'ein sham kol tzorcho. Aval yesh sham kol tzorcho ein mevatzin. In what situation is this the case that you leave aside Torah for these purposes? Where there is not kol tzorcho, where there is not everything that is needed, meaning there aren't enough other people to take care of this. But if there are enough other people to take care of this, then you shouldn't leave aside your Talmud Torah, because other people can do these things, you don't interrupt your Torah. The kama kol tzorcho, and how much is enough to count as many as you need. Rav Shmuel bar Inya, Mishmei de Rav, Treser alfe gavre v'shita alfe shipure. So he said, and this seems to be referring specifically to the case of a burial, that you need Treser alfe gavre, 12,000 men, and 6,000 men with shofar, with trumpets. For Amrila, and some say, a different version, Treser alfe gavre uminayhu shita alfe shipure, which is similar but different, that you actually need 12,000 people or 12,000 men, among whom there are 6,000 with shofar. So either way, it's like a lot of people that you need for a funeral procession. Ula Amar, Kigon dechaitzi gavra ma'avula ad sikra. So Ula says a different definition of how many is enough. If you have enough people to stretch from the gate to the cemetery. Abula ad sikra, from the gate to the cemetery. So like you have enough people to sort of line up and stretch that far. That's how many people you need. Also, probably a very large number. Rav Sheshet Amar, Kenetinata kach netilata. Like the giving, so is the taking. Manetinata b'shishim ribua, af netilata b'shishim ribua. Just as the giving was with 600,000, so too the removals was 600,000. In other words, the giving of the Torah traditionally it had 600,000 men present for that, and so too when you take away the Torah, meaning in this case where there's a death, so the death of a Torah scholar, there's no more learning, etc., or there's no more learning by that person, so that also you should require 600,000 people, so you need a huge number of people for a funeral. Hani mili leman dekari v'tani. Those words are for someone who read, meaning learned Kra, Torah, and also Mishnayot. Aval leman dematni leman dematni late le shiura. But for someone who also taught late le shiura, there is no shiur, there is no limit. Meaning it's you want as many people to come to that funeral as you possibly can. Okay. Tanya Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai Omer, Breita, Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai says, Bore kama chavivin Yisrael lifnei HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Come and see how beloved Israel is by God. Come and see how much God loves us. Shebechol makom shegalu shchina imahen. That in every place where the Jews were exiled, the Shekhinah, God's presence, went with them. Galulu Mitzrayim Shekhinah imahen. When they were exiled to Egypt, the Shekhinah was with them. Shnei Amar Haniglo nigleitu lebeit avicha behirotam b'Mitzrayim b'gomer. A pasuk from Sefer Shmuel about referencing exile. Wasn't I revealed to your father's house when they were in Egypt? Meaning that's where the revelation was. That's where God was. He's talking to Eli, the Kohen, and talks about apparently it's not just showing that the Nevuah happened in Egypt, but from the word nigleti, revealed, the idea is that the Shekhinah actually was in Egypt, was sort of showing up in Egypt with them. Galul Bavel, Shekhinah imahen. And then they were exiled to Bavel, and the Shekhinah was with them there also. Shnei Amar, L'manchem shalachti Bavela. This is, still in the Breita, and it's a pasuk from Yeshayahu. And here also the idea is God is still with you. The L'manchem, right? For your sake, I've been sent to Bavel. Apparently, there's a lot of Rishonim here, but the idea is maybe it's like Shulachti, that God's also been sent with them to Bavel. And so too, when they in the future will be redeemed, the Shekhinah will be redeemed with them. So this pasuk proves that God will return with them from the exile. A pasuk from Dvarim that God will return with you with the exiles who return. That's this. It doesn't say v'heshiv, just that God will return you, ela v'shav, but rather it says v'shav, meaning God's going to return actually with you. So this teaches us that God returns with them from amongst the other nations. So God will return with the Jews from exile because God is in fact in exile with the Jews. Okay, we'll stop there.